Welcome to another episode of Brand Science. Today is going to be a really special one because it is a topic that I love to talk about, which is growing online, specifically on LinkedIn. So, if you are a personal brander, if you are someone who wants to be able to attract an audience and then convert that audience into leads, specifically on LinkedIn, which I know a lot of this audience is, then today is for you because I am joined by none other than Finn McKenty, who does exactly that. He helps entrepreneurs grow and convert that audience on LinkedIn. So, Finn, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, what I want to know is since this is a podcast for personal branders, and I have those who are crushing it online with their own personal brand, what I want to know is what was the journey like into growing your LinkedIn account to what it is? Because you are absolutely crushing it right now. I've been following your work for some time now, and the content you're putting out is great. So, what was that journey like to grow this following and to really understand the, I guess, art and science
hmm
of being able to perform on LinkedIn?
Well, I'll back up to the very beginning and tell you a whole my life story. Not really, but I'll give you my life
Sure.
story in a very as fast as I can because I think probably a lot of other people are in a similar situation. So, I've been doing product design and marketing basically for 20 plus years. And I did some stuff that I think was pretty cool. I first started out kind of in the agency world. The first stuff I worked on was like for like brands like Nike and Nintendo and Red Bull, which was cool. And then after that, worked at another agency where I worked on a bunch of stuff, big brands like Febreze and Swiffer and Tide and Balance, big like Procter and Gamble stuff. After that, I was a designer and marketer for Abercrombie and Fitch and Hollister at sort of the height of those brands. And
Mm,
so I'd done a lot of stuff in my career that I thought was pretty cool, and that I was proud of, but
sure.
nobody cared. you know, like nobody knew who I was. My network wasn't great. And just when I would talk about the stuff that I had done, just kind of like crickets, kind of like, oh, okay, that's nice. And I think a lot of people are in that situation where you're like, man, I think I'm pretty good at what I do. And the people that I work with tell me that, but it seems like I feel invisible and I feel like nobody cares, or I feel like I don't even exist.
Mhm.
And so that's when I started a YouTube channel in 2017, which, to make a long story short, I've gotten about 120 million views there, which is awesome. And that
Yeah.
definitely made people, knew who I am at scale. But it still didn't quite solve the problem that I was trying to solve, which is people didn't know me for what I like sort of really do in my career, which is, marketing, and design. They knew me like as a YouTuber, which again is awesome, but I still didn't feel like people really knew me for what I do. And so, I've been on LinkedIn since probably 2007 or something like that, but I probably went
Mm,
like 3 years without ever even logging in, like I didn't care about it at all. I just made a profile
yeah.
because whatever. And then I realized maybe around 2020 or 2021 that LinkedIn had changed into something very different. So some people listening to this may think of it as what it used to be, which is basically like your online resume where you would like connect with people you worked with for no particular reason. Like I'm going to connect with Dave because we work together. I don't really know why I'm doing this, but I guess I will.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
around that time, it changed into something very different. Maybe it was earlier than that. I don't remember, but it changed into a creator platform. And so I would think of it now as something closer to like, Instagram or Facebook for business. And that is really what I was looking for, is people who I could connect with to talk about the things that I'm most passionate about, which is like marketing, and design. Like how do I make a product and how do I sell it to people? Like that's fundamentally what I do. And so that's when I started taking LinkedIn more seriously and really started, and, I posted like semi-actively there and, got probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 thousand followers just from people knowing who I was on YouTube and stuff. But I really started taking it seriously last year and like really honed in, like doubled down on helping people get to know me specifically for what I do, in marketing and in particular in helping people build their personal brands. And that's when things like really kind of took off. So, the two headlines there, I think, are if you're in a similar place to where I was, of feeling like, man, I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but I feel like I'm not getting any credit for it, and I feel like kind of unseen. Then I think LinkedIn is the place to change that. And number two, the way to change that is, as you mentioned, there are some just sort of specific tactics and stuff to use there, but the main thing is to like focus on being, one thing and really like actively standing for that on LinkedIn. And if you do that consistently, it's going to work.
Yeah. No, I love that, especially because this evolution of LinkedIn has been really interesting to see, as you mentioned, over the last like 5 years or so, where I think they've been making some updates. I think the community itself has just kind of evolved its mindset. And so now LinkedIn is really becoming this powerhouse for being able to attract an ideal client. Let's kind of start there too, because I want to kind of set the stage for why LinkedIn
Hmm.
and for our audience who LinkedIn would be best for. Because I don't think maybe it's for
Yep.
everyone, but it certainly is fantastic for a certain kind of demographic, or you're
Hmm.
trying to reach a certain avatar. So, who would you say is probably worth investing into LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is fundamentally a B2B platform. There's always some exceptions to this, but like fundamentally, it's a B2B platform. So it's, people who are at work who want to do business with other people who are also at work in some way. So and I would say in particular, probably if you are in like marketing, it's probably like the strongest fit. If you want to get a new job or if you want to be a consultant of any kind on anything related to like marketing or product, I think it's a really good place to be. I think those are probably, the most active communities on there. And again, there are exceptions to this. There are people, who run consumer brands and stuff that are on there, and that's cool. But I think fundamentally, excuse me, fundamentally, if you're in B2B, that's what LinkedIn is all about. And the reason it's so great is because people who are active on LinkedIn are there to do business. Like that is the entire point of the platform. They want to find opportunities. Like they're not mad if you're trying to sell them something because they're trying to sell something to you too. And like they understand, it's like going to like a speed dating event. Like everyone knows we're here to meet somebody, and hopefully we
Right.
walk out of here, on a date. So LinkedIn is like that. And so as opposed to like Instagram or TikTok or even YouTube, YouTube's a little bit of a different beast, but especially like TikTok and Instagram, it's like nobody is on there because they want to be sold to. And you sort of you have to do this whole song and dance of like selling without selling and all this kind of stuff, which is fine. And people do make that work. But LinkedIn is a different beast. You can just be like, hey, here's what I do. Here's why you should hire me. So let's do this. And if you do a good job of it, people will hire you. You don't have to sort of do the whole song and dance of pretending not to sell something, which is really refreshing.
Right.
Like people are there to do business.
Yeah, and it's been great to see kind of this evolution too of LinkedIn, where there are people who are trying to sell you something, but they're kind of wrapping it in a coding of value. So even if you're not interested in their service, you're at least walking away with something
Hmm.
valuable. So okay, so let's say our audience, they're B2B, or a coach, consultant, someone who is bought into the idea of LinkedIn being for them, but
Hmm.
maybe they have a profile. They're like you back in 2007. They have a profile, but they've like never touched it. They don't really, they have 1,000, friend requests
Yep.
they've never accepted
Yep.
and all that kind of stuff. They haven't really invested into it. What is kind of like day one, priority one for someone who wants to start on LinkedIn?
The first thing I would do is optimize your profile. And what that looks like is, the reality is you can only be one thing to the world at one time. And most of us are multifaceted people. And, none of us want to sort of reduce ourselves to one thing, but that's just kind of how it has to be. Like, you can't be a photographer and whatever, a software engineer and a cyclist, because it's just and this and this and this, because every
It's a
time you
very interesting person, if so.
well look, there's a lot, no, but there are a lot of people who probably are all those things. But
Yeah.
as far as how you present yourself, it's just adding too much mental friction to people, like um to ask them to parse you in such a nuanced way. They're just not going to do it because we're all
Right.
cognitive misers. And asking me to like go down the rabbit hole of who Dave is, like, I'm just not going to do it because that's just the way people work. So you got to
Mm.
pick the one thing that you want to be to the world, whatever and remember, like, you can always change this. You can always test things, but you got to start somewhere. It's like, what is the one thing that I want to be? For example, in my career, like, I mean, I was a designer for like over 10 years. I'm good at it. I've been doing marketing for longer than that. I'm good at it. I've had a lot of success at YouTube. Any of those three things, I could credibly present myself as one of those three things. But presenting myself as all three of those things, even though like I actually am credible at all three of them, as you said, like number one, it's hard, it's too much, and number two, it's like nobody's going to believe you. It's just they're just not going to. So you pick one, and then optimize your profile to reflect that. So what that looks like is number one, the headline. So that's the thing under your name, which most people, I think by default, it's just like your job title. And you probably don't want that because, I mean, it depends, but you don't want that because, you know, assistant to the senior manager of influencer partnerships. I don't really know what you do, right?
Yeah.
Because most titles are weird like that. So what I would suggest for that headline is the thing you do and who you do it for, followed by some sort of like demonstrated proof of your expertise. So, and the more specific, the better. So something like, uh, you know, um, long tail SEO for B2B SaaS, early stage B2B SaaS companies. Like that's the level of like specificity I would suggest you get to, because
Mm.
again, as we all know, you can't be all things to all people. And as much as it feels like you're limiting your opportunities by focusing, that's not true, because it's better to hyper serve one niche segment of the market than it is to like underserve the entire market. You want people who are your ICP to like immediately go, oh wow, Dave, his profile looks pretty juicy because that's exactly what I need right now. So that's the first
Mhm.
part of it. The second part of it should be some sort of demonstrated proof of your expertise, ideally in some sort of a quantitative format. So again, let's say you do long tail SEO or whatever, and you could say something like, 30 plus, clients served since 2014 or whatever the number is, or, that part's going to depend, or, 3x, marketing leader, or whatever it is that you can just throw out there that's going to make people think that you're legit. Because again, people are cognitive misers, and especially at the point where they're just like browsing your profile, this is like what Procter and Gamble would call the first moment of truth, meaning that this is your one chance to make an impression in 3 to 7 seconds, so you want to make it count. Second thing you want to do is optimize your banner, which is the graphic at the top. And for that, I would suggest putting some sort of a statement of what the world will look like after somebody works with you. So, again, if you do this long tail SEO, maybe it's something like, 3x your, qualified traffic in, some, I don't know, whatever. But some
Mhm.
sort of like you know, paint a picture of the world of what will happen with what after they work with you. The next thing you want to do is optimize your about section, which is like the description where usually people are like, Dave is a multifaceted collaborative team member who blah, 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 all that stuff that nobody cares about.
Yeah.
So again, rewrite that, reframe that to be about the viewer, like paint a picture of like, of the problem statement for them. You like basically with this in general, there's three things you want to convince them of number one is that the status quo is not working. Number two is the time to make a change is now, because there's lots of times where people might say, again, to talk about SEO, they'd be like, yeah, I know our SEO is not great, but whatever, we've got other fish to fry. You need to convince them that, yeah, you have 9 million things on your list of priorities, but SEO needs to be at the top of the list of that priorities for the following reason. And then the last thing you need to convince them of is that you are the person that can help them make that change. The last part is where I think a lot of people over index on, because really, if you do a good job of the first two things, meaning that you highlight a problem and convince them that the time to make a change is now, usually it doesn't take that much to convince them that you're the person to do it. Same way as if the plumber comes over to your house and like, hey, Dave, I want to show you something. And you're like, okay, what is it? And he's like, see this pipe here? See how rusty that is? See how corroded that is? Probably got another 60 days before this breaks and floods your living room. You're like, okay, yeah, let's fix that. He doesn't
Yeah.
need to like persuade you that he knows how to fix the pipe, right?
If
So
you can identify the problem, you're most likely the person to be able to fix it too.
yeah, don't take that for granted, but I think generally speaking, people focus a lot on that part and they usually don't need to. But that's what you want to do with your about section. So that would be the first thing to do. Optimize your profile in those three ways: the headline, banner, and about section. There's also the featured links, which you can add, but I would say that can be secondary.
So what's interesting here is because, and you may, I think, have some experience with this too. Is, I come from like a website design
Yeah.
background, landing page design background. These things that you land on that sells you
Hmm.
product or service,
Your profile is a landing
and
page.
yeah, so like that's what kind of what I'm hearing. So like a landing page, something that's a web page that's trying to sell you something, really has like the same elements
Hmm.
that you're talking about in the sense of a main headline at the top that basically describes the value of what the product or service
Hmm.
is, some sort of demonstrative visual that shows you what you get
Yep.
if you opt into the service, and then a series of texts and sections that break down like why you need our product, why we're the best for that, to service you in that area, things like that. So really it sounds like your LinkedIn profile is a landing page for you, the personal
Yep.
brand, your yeah, your individual personal brand.
100%. That's exactly what it is. And there's some more sort of nuances of things you can optimize there. But if you're just starting out, that's the way to think about it, is like, this is a landing page. Assume that somebody saw a piece of content that you made and they're like, oh, this Dave guy seems smart. What's he all about? And they click on your profile. What would you want them to see in that, literally 5 to 7 seconds?
Sure. Um, yeah, so that's interesting. And then, so I think the key element too that we initially were talking about is finding that one
Hmm.
thing that you want to be known for. And you mentioned, you know, to be able for them to understand that within 5 to 7 seconds. I think those two things go hand in
Yep.
hand. Where, yeah, if you're trying to promote yourself as 15 different things, it's going to take more than 5 or 7 seconds to try to wrap your head
Hmm.
around all that in general. So you would just want them to know this is the one thing you come to me
Yep.
for, and they should know that within landing on your page within the first couple seconds. And so it needs to be very simple
Yep.
and straightforward.
And it's hard for a lot of people because, again, most of us are nuanced people, that most of us are more than just one thing. And so it can be, it can be scary or difficult, or it feels like you are really like letting go of something to sort of to narrow things down. But you know uh, what you'll find is that the more you do that, the better results you get. And then you'll understand that, like, okay, I should have done this a long time ago.
All right, great. So the LinkedIn profile is basically your personal brand landing page,
Hmm.
if you will. How are people discovering your profile? What is the kind of the next step in the progress of your LinkedIn efforts
Yep.
to be able to get people to the profile?
Yep, yep. So that's the next step. There's two ways that that's going to happen. Number one is by publishing content that hopefully people like, and they see it in their feed, and the algorithmic magic does its magic and brings people there. And we can talk a little bit about the details of what that content strategy might be. But the second way is going to be through engaging with other people's content, which, especially for like a new creator, is a really good way to do it. Because if you're wondering, like, yeah, I've got 200 followers that are people I used to work with that aren't super active. How do I get people to find me? Commenting is a great way to do that. So make a list of, I don't know, 10 or 20, people where you believe that the other people seeing their content are your ICP. So for example, again, if you do SEO, probably the people that would hire you would be, either marketers or product managers, something along those lines. Well, what other creators are those people following on LinkedIn? Make a list of those and turn on, there's a little like notifications bell there, on the upper part of everyone's profile. Turn that on so that every time one of those people comments, you get a notification. And as soon as you see that, try to leave a really good, thoughtful comment on there. I'll give you an example of this, which just happened to me yesterday. There's a guy named Adam Robinson who's like the CEO of retention.com. And he made a post saying, hey, like, my YouTube channel sucks. I'm looking for somebody who can help me with that. And obviously that's something I would like to help him with. And so I left a comment there. He also had like a form to fill out, which I did. But I always want to stack the deck in my favor, so I left a comment saying, with my pitch for him on that. And I got probably 20 connection requests within a couple hours from that, and I booked 3 discovery calls in like 2 hours with people I haven't talked to them yet, but people who definitely seem like my ICP, like startup founders and stuff like that, just based on one comment that took me whatever 10 minutes to write.
Well,
But
can we pause
yeah,
there? Because I feel like that's somewhat of like a like a hack, if you will. It sounds like if someone who's credible or has a large following puts out kind of a bat signal
yep,
saying, "Hey, I need help in this area," other people who follow that person might also need that
hmm,
help and go, "Oh, yeah, I need that too. Let me kind of follow this
yep,
post and see who raises their hand." If you just contribute and say, "Hey, I do that,"
yep,
you're now marketing
yep.
yourself essentially to that entire community as
And to
well.
be honest, I didn't even think about that. Like I literally just made that because I wanted him to see it.
Sure.
Um, but in hindsight, it's exactly what you said. And also, I do want to highlight one thing that I said there. I said, "Oh, I got all these results from one comment that took me 10 minutes to write," as though 10 minutes to write a comment is not a lot of time. But most people probably don't spend 10 minutes writing a comment. Most people spend 15 seconds on it. And I'm not saying you need to spend 10 minutes on every comment, but especially in this stage where you are trying to get visibility, people will absolutely notice if you leave like really good, thoughtful comments. And don't force it. Don't try to, you know, don't try too hard to be, to give value because like that's kind of irritating too. But like if you really have something to say, then like take the time. Don't just say, "Hey Dave, nice post, totally agree." Like add something if you can. Um so yeah, so that is one way that you're going to get people to check out your content. Um
Well, I wanna pause here a little bit too, because I think this is important. The When you're starting to create content, it can feel like a Herculean task to figure out templates and formats and what you want to say and your story and all that. And so people kind of put it off for that case.
mhm,
But I think what's important here is, and you mentioned it at the beginning, is this is like a very much easier stepping stone into content
mhm,
creation where kind of the ideation for you're still creating content.
mhm,
A comment is still content, as you just said.
mhm,
Like you created content in the form of a content and got 20 requests
yep,
and booking calls and such. So that's still content creation, and you don't need to necessarily come up with the topic
mhm,
because the topic is the topic of the post you're commenting
yep,
on. So it helps with ideation, and then you're still adding value and you're still like working through your concepts of like, all right, I want to add it, like you're saying, a very credible, valuable content. So you're practicing the muscles of content creation without having to like really
start from
press
scratch.
publish on
Yep,
an individual post.
yep,
So do you have any in terms of being able to craft a good comment? Because I want people who want to start getting into LinkedIn and want to start creating content, if they want to just take this kind of lily pad approach of, okay, maybe I'll just start
mhm,
commenting and I won't,
mhm,
I won't create carousels and all that
yep.
kind of stuff, but I can comment. What are some ways that they can think about, all right, how do I craft a valuable content or about comment that is going to catch the eye of the person I'm commenting to? Because also too, sometimes you might be commenting on someone who gets hundreds of comments, and
Yep.
so like, how do I stand out? Do you have any practical tips there to like how to actually craft a valuable comment?
You know, it might be a little bit naive or simplistic, but I think it's kind of just what you said of like try to craft a valuable comment. I sort of like I'm definitely in favor of like frameworks and systems and stuff like that in general, but specifically when it comes to like comments, there's a part of me that sort of doesn't like that because we can all see when people are commenting, with sort of an ulterior motive, like it's obvious. You know what I mean? Like there's some of these like uh company accounts that will always comment on big creators, and it's like we know what you're doing here. And I said that people on LinkedIn are there to do business, which is true, but that doesn't mean that, that people are there to be spammed. And I think in particular people on LinkedIn do not want their time wasted, and they're not stupid. Like people on LinkedIn are high performers and they're smart. So I think just do your best to leave what you think is a genuinely valuable, helpful comment. And I think that's the best way to think about it.
Yeah, I like the word genuine too,
Yeah.
because as you're saying, I think you can tell the difference between, I mean, I get comments sometimes on my posts that are, it's just like literally just the word interesting
Yeah.
or like very valuable. And
Right.
you're like, all right, did you click the AI button to generate this or
Yeah.
whatever? Explain to me why you thought it was
Yeah,
interesting.
exactly.
Like
Exactly.
give me context or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't
and as
just
long as it feels genuine.
don't just restate their post, because again, that's sort of even if you don't use AI for that, you might as well. It's not good content. Like, just genuinely do your best to add to the conversation and help and be yourself. I think that's the best thing you can do.
Hey, Dave here. Just want to pause the episode real quick to say thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Brand Science. I'm hoping that you're getting as much value as a viewer or a listener as I got as a host. And if you are getting value from today's episode, yep, you know what time it is. I would love it if you could just give this episode a little like or a comment. That would go a long way in helping boost my ego, but also helping boost the social media algorithm gods so that this episode can be found by more awesome people just like you. Well, anyway, now that we got that out of the way, let's get back to the episode. All right, so our audience has got our optimized profile, and now they've dipped their toe into content creation by starting to publish or post comments on other people's posts. And now they want to graduate to actually publishing their own pieces of
Yep.
content, their own posts. What should they be thinking about there?
So think about your content as a funnel, just like anything else in marketing. So there's going to be, broadly speaking, three different types of content. The top of the funnel is going to be content because, again, that's sort of, even if you don't use AI for that, you might as well. It's not good content. Like, just genuinely do your best to add to the conversation and help and be yourself, where the goal is to grow your account by getting lots of engagement. Hopefully people comment and share and all those other things that gets it like bubbled up in the algorithm. So typically that would be things like, your commentary on industry trends or current events or whatever that are happening. For example, a couple weeks ago, Canva did this video at, whatever their event was. So they had this rap song that was like kind of cringe, and a lot of people were talking about that. Right. So if you're, like for me, I talk about video content a lot. So that was like an obvious thing of something I should talk about. But it doesn't have to be like a current event. It could just be sort of an industry trend or an observation of like, hey, I've been doing this for a long time. Here's one thing I've noticed that new people really struggle with. Something like that would be kind of the top of the funnel typically. And again, the goal there is to get a lot of engagement and grow your account. The second step of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, is the goal of this type of content is to establish your expertise on the thing that you're talking about. So that would be, probably more how to kind of stuff, or, yeah, like more detailed kind of content there, where it's establishing your frameworks, how you think about it, a tutorial on how to do a thing, that sort of thing. So that, again, if you think about the viewer journey, if you want to put it that way, of like, oh, I found Dave's account and it was interesting because he was talking about, his experience of, being in this industry for a long time and the trends he's seen. This guy seems sharp. And then the next thing they see is a post where you're saying, well, here's my actual 5-step framework for doing this thing that I talk about. And you're like, okay, damn, this guy knows what he's doing. And then the bottom of the funnel is where you are asking them to take some sort of action, whether that is sign up for your newsletter, book a discovery call, demo your product, buy your course, whatever it might be. Broadly speaking, again, there's always exceptions to these rules, but broadly speaking, I would say, for someone who's in the growth phase of their account, let's say 60% top of the funnel, 30% middle of the funnel, 10% bottom of the funnel. Again, those aren't hard and fast rules, but something along those lines, I think, is where I would start.
Yeah. So starting at the top, with the top of funnel content, you've mentioned like the algorithm a few different times. I've heard that LinkedIn actually doesn't want content to go viral. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, like if something goes viral, they said that something went wrong because they want to focus on making sure that they get the right content to the right audience, and that means smaller
Hmm.
audiences, but the more targeted
Hmm.
audience, similar to how we say niche down,
Yep.
so that you focus on that niche audience. So you mentioned a few examples of types of top of funnel content that would kind of play to the algorithm for what it can do. What have you seen with the algorithm, if you will, and reach, and the types of content that you find gets the most reach and attracts the most new audience to your account?
Well, people have pointed out correctly that organic reach on LinkedIn is down from what it was a couple years ago, because that's totally true. I mean, I was looking at some of my old posts from like 2022 when I like didn't really even put that much effort into LinkedIn, and I was getting like 250 likes on them. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
10,000 impressions on just the most like half-assed post. I was like, that was
Why do you
nice.
think reach is down?
Well, I think that they have made some adjustments. What they have said is exactly what you said, is that they've made some tweaks to their algorithm such that they want to get the right content to the right people. Um, and I don't know whether that's true, but it seems like that's a good goal. Because again, and we all want to see that impressions number be as big as possible. But if you actually think about it, let's say that you're in the business of, if you're an SEO consultant, it doesn't really do you that much good, to have whatever, like HR people in Europe, seeing your content if you're an SEO consultant that focuses on American companies. So,
Right.
yes, of course, all the other things being equal, I want everybody to see my content, but it's actually better if they've executed on what they have said, which I don't know if they have. Like, that's actually better. um, and so as far as the type of content, well, and the other thing is that there's just more creators now because
Mm,
people have realized the stuff we talked about at the beginning of sort of what an opportunity LinkedIn is. In the same way as organic reach on Instagram used to be crazy. And then around whatever, maybe 2016 or something like that, when more and more people sort of got on there, organic reach keeps going down just because that's supply and demand. There's only so much, the
yeah.
amount of attention is roughly the same, but the amount of creators goes up, which means that the average amount of attention per creator is going to go down, just like numerator and denominator. Um,
Yeah.
but I, you know, I think it's pointless to like focus on that. And also, the great thing about LinkedIn is you don't necessarily need huge reach to get a lot of results. I mean, again, I booked 3 discovery calls yesterday based on one comment. I don't know how many people saw it, probably, whatever, in the hundreds or something like that. And I booked 3 calls from it. I know lots of people that have, follower counts in the single digit thousands, which might sound, if you're starting with nothing, that seems like a lot, but it really isn't. Like I know someone with he has maybe 2,000 followers and he has an agency that's like killing it. And he gets like 1 or 2 new clients every month with 2,000 followers. And I mean, if you can't have a business signing 1 or 2 new clients a month, then you're probably in the wrong business, right?
Well, I think it's an important point because I've seen this too. I think we're reaching a kind of inflection point in the industry, specifically the personal branding industry, as it becomes more popular. Is the idea of follower counts is becoming more and more
It
meaningless, if
doesn't
you
mean
will. It's
anything. Yeah.
always kind of been that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been that fluff number to make you feel good and to maybe show off to your friends and such. But really, that's not an indicator of how well your business is
Nope.
doing, because who knows how that number was created, how that follower account was generated. So I think right now we're in this age of quality over
Yes.
quantity. And so that goes to your follower count, it goes to how much engagement you're getting on a post and how, your reach. And so if you get, your reach is maybe 500 people and 2 or 3 of those people even engage with it, but one of those people turns into a sale,
Yep.
that's obviously more valuable than having hundreds of thousands of people see it and no sales.
Yep.
So
And in the
yeah, I think
context
there's
of what we're talking about here, 500 people is a lot. Like in the context of YouTube, it's trash. If my video got 500 views on YouTube, that's a flop. But on LinkedIn, if 500 people, like that's a lot of people. And if again, So here's the second thing I wanted to, well, we can talk about content, but I want to make sure I touch on this is like sort of relevant to this point. LinkedIn really is about quality more so than quantity. And you want to make sure that you're taking full, I don't want to say advantage, that's because that sounds transactional in a way that I don't imply, but making the most of the people who do engage with your stuff. Meaning that let's say your post gets 30 likes, that might not seem like a lot, but again, that's 30 people. And in the context of like business development, I would argue 30 people have expressed some sort of interest in anything is kind of a lot. So every person who has liked that content, I would say you have permission to like engage with them in some way. And so you could think of this as sort of a funnel of like the first thing would be to like add them as a connection. So if they've liked your content or viewed your profile or interacted with you in any other way, I think you have permission to like add them as a connection, and send them a note if you can along with it. Literally anything that doesn't sound automated, I think is fine. You like some guy, I added him yesterday and he said something in his profile about dinosaurs. And I just added like, I'm here for the dinosaurs, something that like makes it clear you're not a bot because nobody wants those. So that's
Yeah.
one thing you can do to sort of move them down the funnel a little bit. If they're already connected to you, you could send them a DM like, hey, thanks for liking that. I appreciate the support. That's an option. Certainly anybody that leaves a comment, it's totally fair game to DM them and say like, hey, I really appreciated that comment. I've noticed the same thing, whatever. Just, don't pitch slap people. And I mean, you can actually sometimes do that, but I would avoid that for the most part. Um, but point being is to make sure that you are, maximizing the potential of the people who do engage with your stuff, not focused like fixating on that impressions number, which is what a lot of people think about. I think is a mistake because it's not, like you said, it's not the impressions, it's what you do with them. And here's where like you need to have an actual sales process, to make sure that you're taking, full advantage of the people who do engage with you.
So we have our landing page. We have our one thing that we're known
Yep.
for. People are discovering our content and going and requesting us or following us, and then they're ideally continuing to follow us and engage with our content to the point where we're taking notice and we're going, all right, this seems like someone
Hmm.
who's interested in what I'm doing. The next step, it sounds like, is to kind of move the conversation from the feed into the
Yep.
DM, and kind of like, if you're at a conference and you're kind of floating around the floor and you bump into someone that you think would be a good client, you go, oh, let's go
You want to get some
grab a
coffee?
drink at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
bar over here,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
So now that's kind of, this is where it sounds like you're going to start to be able to convert
Yep.
something into a potential lead. And how, for those, people don't want to come off salesy, like you said, you don't want to pitch slap someone.
Yep.
What's the gentle way to kind of transition a conversation into a potential lead or acquisition for you?
Again, I think it goes back to like being genuine and authentic. Like I never ever ever like try to sell somebody something unless I genuinely believe that they need it. And there's lots of times actually where I talk to someone, like a lot of people ask me about like doing YouTube, and for a lot of them I'm like, honestly, I don't think it's a good idea for you for the following reasons. And if they still
Mhm.
want to work with me, I mean, I will, but um uh, more often like almost always they're like, "Oh, thank you. Like I hadn't thought about it that way." And I just saved them potentially months of like beating their head against the wall of trying to make YouTube work when it was never going to. So I believe that in that case, like, number one, I just like to help people. But number two, lots of those people have referred me to other people, even though I said, like, hey, I don't think YouTube is right for you. A month or two later, someone will hit me up and be like, hey, so and so, said you're the person to talk to about YouTube. So it can still, I think, work out for you, as a sales tactic to not sell people. But point being, I think, is just to be genuine and authentic. Like if, for example, like if someone's the founder of a company, like I would say, hey, I really, like your content here on LinkedIn. And I actually think like YouTube would be a great fit for you for the following reason. Again, this is someone who's interacted with my content a few times. So like they know who I am. I think YouTube has a lot of potential for you for the following reason. Let me know if you want to talk. And lots of times they will. And if they don't, okay. I mean, so what? right? Or if it's somebody who if it's somebody who I believe has potential on LinkedIn, it's the same thing of like, hey, like you leave so many great comments, like you seem like you have a lot to say about this. Have you ever thought about taking LinkedIn a little bit more seriously? I think you have a lot of potential. And again, I only say that if I genuinely believe it. And I think in general, if you just operate from a place of authenticity and like genuinely sincerely trying to help people, I think people can tell.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's usually, I mean, we all, if you're on LinkedIn and if you're actively on LinkedIn and you're checking your messages, that's usually, we can tell because we're getting this, like, we are getting pitch slapped right away with something that is just like this templated. It's not
Yeah.
genuine. It's not,
Hello, first name.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's not custom to us. So we feel as though it's just copy and pasted. They friend request people and they copy and paste this template message to try to get it. It's just spray and pray
Yep.
or whatever. But to your point here, it's like you need to kind of qualify the person the best you can, and then genuinely give like a custom response of like, hey, after checking out your stuff, almost like a little bit of like a consultation or audit, it
Hmm.
sounds like, and kind of win the trust that way versus just kind of like copying pasting something generic to them.
Yep.
Do you usually start, do you come right away with that, or do you maybe try to go, hey, like,
I actually
saw
don't
you
do very
commented
much
on.
outbound, because I
uh,
haven't needed to. I do a little, like, I do outbound, like if I see someone where I genuinely like, man, I want to help this person, then I'll message them. But like, I do not currently have an outbound like daily thing that I do because I haven't needed to. But that's what I would do if I needed to. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
is that because people are coming, finding your profile, are they clicking off
yes.
into like a link and
Yeah, I get a lot of inbound. I get enough inbound. Like I said, I got booked three discovery calls yesterday, which is I don't book three every day. Like if I did, that would be crazy, but that'd be
yeah,
too much. I get enough inbound that I'm busy, which is ideal,
yeah.
right? And if you do a good job, like you probably won't at the beginning get that much inbound, but you might. And so ideally, that's what you want. Is it's all like inbound and word of mouth.
And that inbound is happening because on your profile, you have that call to action. You have that
Yeah, and
link
and
that
in
people
all
are
my
coming in.
posts at the bottom, this is another good detail which I forgot to mention. And all my posts at the bottom, I have a CTA which says I help entrepreneurs grow on LinkedIn and YouTube. DM me to see if I can help you, or I forget exactly what it says, but like I tell them to DM me. There's another way that you could do that of sort of opening that door is you can have a book a call link in your profile, which I used to have, but I was getting too much inbound and a lot of it was like tire kickers and stuff to the point where my calendar was just getting clogged up with people that were, they're just tire kickers. And so I deliberately introduced more friction for that exact reason because I figured like if someone really like cares, if they don't like if they can't even be bothered to DM me, then this person is definitely not going to have the courage to like be a creator.
Sure. That's interesting. So you've moved, because this is something too where people who are just getting started and maybe aren't very tech savvy, don't have maybe a website set up just yet,
You don't need one.
or maybe they don't know how to set up a Calendly or
Yep.
something like that. So really, like your tech stack for your marketing efforts is really just your LinkedIn account, because your landing page is your LinkedIn
Hmm.
profile, your marketing efforts are your LinkedIn feed, the content you're publishing,
Yep.
and then kind of like the conversation, the chat bot, if you will, is your
Yep.
DMs. So if you can get people to go into the DMs, you can qualify them that
Yep.
way,
And you can
and then
tell
maybe set up
very,
a
very
call.
quickly, at least I can tell very quickly from DMs whether somebody is like qualified or not. Not 100%, but I'm it's pretty clear if if someone's like, "Hey, I'm interested." Someone will usually send me a DM that's like, "Hey, I'm interested in YouTube." Kind of vague like that. I'm like, "Okay, sounds cool. Can you tell me more about what you have going on and why you're thinking about YouTube?" And their reply to that will almost always tell me whether this is going to be a fit or not. Like if someone says, "Hey, I'm a startup founder and we've seen the success that so and so had with YouTube, and we think there's potential for us, then I'm like, okay, cool, let's talk. If they're like, well, I don't know, like I like Mr. Beast and I just always thought it would be cool to do YouTube, so I've just been thinking about it. So to that person, I'd be like, I don't want to be rude, but like that's a person that probably is not a fit for me. So I'd be like,
Yeah.
sounds good. Let me know when you start the channel and I'll see if I can help.
Sure. So it sounds like, all right, so there's have profile, and then there's post content, and then there's a tracked
Yep.
audience that ideally DMs you. Sometimes you're doing some outbound and DMing them. I feel like the core keystone there is, or you could be commenting, but the core keystone here is the content that you should
Your
be
point of view.
publishing.
Yes. That this is the key to all of it, is your point of view, is like,
Okay.
how are you different from everybody else? Right. Like for me, like the thing that I sort of hammer on a lot, going back to what I was talking about in the beginning, is the idea that like that everybody needs visibility, and the idea that opportunities, right or wrong, opportunities usually go to the people who are the most visible, not necessarily the people who, quote unquote, deserve them.
Yeah.
Just is the way it is. Kind of sucks. It's frustrating to me, but that's just the way it is. And so,
Hmm.
that's like a message that I really hammer on. And you find the right person at the right time. Someone sees that post where, they just got turned down for a promotion or something like that, because there's someone else at the company that's a better self promoter or whatever, or, and they're like, you know what, F this, like, I'm tired of being ignored. I need to start building my personal brand. And then they DM me. Right. So a lot of it is
Yeah.
just consistency and hitting the right person at the right time. Same with like cold calling sales, is like, it's just a lot of it is like, did you happen to call that person at the moment that they were just frustrated with their existing vendor? And then they're
Right.
like, you know what? Yeah, let's talk.
The squeaky wheel gets the leads,
Yep.
as they say.
Yep. Yep.
So you mentioned, okay, point of view, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where LinkedIn is becoming more and more popular. Like, the word is out, right?
Hmm.
And with people who obviously say LinkedIn is where you should be in order to get leads, and it's part of their service too. So they're obviously promoting it. More and more people are coming to LinkedIn for that reason, which means competition is a little bit
Hmm.
higher. Your impressions are a little bit lower, for better or worse,
Yep.
as we talked about. But I think when people want to start their personal brand, or they get fearful of not wanting to start publishing content, is because they feel the space is already inundated with other pros talking about it. And do I have a unique angle on something?
The answer is
Is
yes,
there
you
room
do.
for me?
The answer is yes. We all do, because
Mm.
you are you and I am me. Right now, how you find it may take you a little while to find that, but yes, you absolutely do. And it's in there for every single one of us.
And how do we differentiate ourselves, or how do we know what is unique about us that is going to resonate with our audience versus what our competition is putting out?
The thing that I spend the most time with people on in the beginning when I work with them on LinkedIn or on YouTube is to come up with what I call 3 to 5 belief statements, which are things you believe to be true about the world, specifically in regard to the topic that you want to discuss on LinkedIn. So, for example, like I talked about, like visibility, that visibility oftentimes matters more than competence. Like that would be one of my beliefs. Um, Another one of my beliefs is that results matter more than feelings, because there's a lot of people who sort of get in their own way with content of like, well, I don't want to do this, I think whatever, I think selfies on LinkedIn are corny. I'm like, all right, well, people like them, so you can choose, you can do whatever you want, but the fact of the matter is that like selfies on LinkedIn get a lot of engagement, so if you want engagement, you should probably try it. Whatever, I could keep going, but all of us, there's like, no matter what you do, like even if you do something that you think is boring, like I used to do printing for like years, from when I was like 15 till I was like 22 years old. I did printing, and even there, like you can have a lot of really strong opinions about printing, like if anybody here knows anything about printing, I could be like, spot color is a waste of budget 99% of the time. Just run it process. Nobody's going to care. And anybody here who knows anything about printing is probably laughing because they're like, yeah, it's true. We made this a seven
Right.
color job when it could have been a 4 color job, could have saved everybody a lot of time and money, and would have just made it a lot easier. So no matter what you do, no matter who you are, no matter how like mundane you think it is, you have some opinions that will make you stand out from the crowd. It's just a matter of like articulating those. And what I think about is like there's two reactions that you want to have from people when you share these things. One of two. Number one would be that people will say, yes, I've been trying to tell people this for years. And if they have that reaction, then they're gonna love you because you are sort of also crusading for the same thing. Like the point I made about printing. It's like every pressman is probably gonna be like, yes, please stop wasting my time running these as 7 color jobs instead of 4. Um, or the other thing, the other reaction that I think is helpful is if someone says, oh, I never thought about it that way before, because then you just change their mind about something, and as soon as you change their mind about something, now they look at you as like as a thought leader. So big picture, that's what you're trying to do, is like articulate your point of view in such a way that you will cause people to have one of those two reactions.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, either way you win. Or I think maybe even a third, which isn't too bad, is probably if someone disagrees or has a visceral reaction to it, maybe they need to hit the comments and engage with that post in order to kind of
Yes,
tell you their
I
opinions,
think
right? And maybe they're right, maybe they're not, but it's still engagement, it's still activity. And if they're wrong, maybe you can change their mind in later or whatever. But still, getting that engagement, that community together to kind of discuss that topic is also, I think, still valuable anyway.
totally. But the way I would not optimize for that. And there are people who do, who just sort of put out hot takes specifically because they know it's going to get a lot of engagement. And that will get a lot of engagement. But the issue there is that it's not necessarily great for your business to have people just like arguing with you. If you were seeking it out, I would the nuance there to me is that people disagreeing with you is a natural byproduct of having a strong point of view, and it's going to happen organically, but I don't think you should seek it out specifically on LinkedIn. It's a little bit different on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, where the entire point of those platforms is just to get engagement for its own sake. LinkedIn is a little bit different. And the thing to consider is that the energy that you put out into the world is the energy that you're going to get back. So if you're constantly firing out like spicy argumentative takes and stuff like that, you're probably going to attract a lot of other people who are like spicy and argumentative, and that's probably not the kind of people that you want to work with. Um, and I have experienced, like, if anybody wants to know my experience with this, go look up my name on Reddit or Twitter and see what people think about me. It's very, very, very nasty, and it sucks. Um,
Jeez.
and I accept that it's going to happen, but I don't think it's beneficial to seek it out, specifically on LinkedIn.
And I want to kind of end on this point here, because I think it's an important one too. Is I know a lot of people don't want to post on LinkedIn because of how they think others are going to perceive them, specifically on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
because it is a more professional platform where they don't want to post like personal stuff, or any, or even sometimes come off as a thought leader,
Yep.
informational content, because they don't want to look like a tryhard or something like that. What would you say to people who are just, I guess, fearful of showing up in a genuine way, but
Yep.
have that fear of, oh, other people aren't going to perceive this correctly, or they think that they're going to be belittled
Yep.
or made fun of or spammed?
Two things. Number one is the scenarios you're making up in your head are almost certainly way worse than what is actually going to happen. Like in reality, it's pretty unlikely that you, let's say, whatever, a marketer at a medical devices equipment, medical devices company or something like that, that talks about marketing medical devices on LinkedIn, it's pretty unlikely that, at any sort of meaningful scale, that people are going to be like, oh my God, what did Dave just say about marketing, endoscopic surgery devices. What is he smoking crack? Like, it's pretty unlikely. It's
Yeah.
probably not going to happen. If there's a couple isolated examples of that, so what? That's what these are people who are having a bad day and they're taking it out on you, and it's not going to affect you, realistically. So that's number one is the bad things that you think are going to happen are almost certainly not as bad in reality as they are in your imagination. And number two is consider the alternative, which is to keep being invisible and hidden in the shadows. And yes, you will escape judgment by hiding. But then what?
Yeah.
You just like then just go hide in the basement for the rest of your life. But then what? So it just is what it is like, it's like Teddy Roosevelt's man in the arena speech. That's what it is. It's like you got to put yourself out there, and yeah, some people are going to be buttholes about it, but so what? Listen, people have said the most awful things about me, like literally the most awful things you could imagine. And hundreds of people have said this for years. Hasn't stopped me from doing what I want to do. I make more people hate me every year and I make more money every year. It's just a
Sure.
natural byproduct of like, as you become more well known, just the sheer number of people, there's X percent of people are like jerks and haters, and it's gonna happen, but it's not gonna matter.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, it's let them hate while you're cashing your checks, I guess, right?
It's not gonna matter. Like, so what?
Yeah.
So okay, so one guy at whatever, Hillrom, medical devices doesn't like you because of something you said on LinkedIn. So what? Who cares?
Right.
What's okay?
Right.
Even if he's like a hiring manager and you're never going to get a job at that company because of him. Okay, well, there's 50 other companies that do know who you are, and who cares about that guy? Let him be mad. You didn't want to
Totally.
work for him anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I'm going to do something a little different. If you got some more time here,
Sure.
I usually what I want to do is kind of create like a bit of a lightning round, kind of bonus ending Q&A here for all those who have stuck with us throughout the entire
Thank
podcast.
you.
This is kind of your present at the end here. So quick lightning round, bonus questions here. In your full experience growing your personal brand, what has been the number one benefit that you've seen, whether it be financially, business opportunities, or the like? What's kind of the number one business benefit from your personal brand that you've seen?
The number one benefit is that I get to talk to really cool, smart people all the time that, like, genuinely, I view them as friends, and it's cool. And I'm really, like, it makes me really happy to have these people in my life.
I love that. Hopefully, I'm one of those people now. Um, the What's the hardest lesson you've had to learn when growing your personal brand that you want to make sure our audience doesn't have to go through?
um, don't build an audience of people, don't build the wrong audience, which I think I did to some extent on YouTube.
Mm,
And that's a whole other conversation, but yeah, don't do that. I have 120
sure.
million views on YouTube, and probably 119.9 million of those are not the people I would choose to interact with.
Well, that's very important. I mean, it goes back to what we were saying in terms of picking your niche, but then making sure that you're also attracting that
Yep.
to the right people. Um, and what are some, we talked about growing on LinkedIn and, some of the best practices for that. What are some ideal LinkedIn personal brands or profiles that you look up to that you think our audience should check out that is like the ideal version of everything that we've talked about today?
I mean, probably my favorite example is a friend of mine who I knew, before he sort of started popping off on LinkedIn. This guy named Anthony Pieri, who does, he talks about product marketing, specifically like positioning for like early stage SaaS startups. And he's just so laser focused. Like, if you look at his profile, I think his headline is something like homepage messaging for early stage horizontal B2B SaaS companies, I think, is like his messaging, super specific. And in particular, like the one thing that he's known for is the idea that you should market features, not benefits, which is sort of counter to the usual way that people think about, like, oh, benefits, not features. And he just always hammers on the opposite of that. And he has 50,000 followers now. His company's killing it. And it's, I think, all because he has like really just zoned in on that incredibly specific point of view and just relentlessly hammered on it for years.
Love it. Well, Finn, this has been awesome. I think to summarize everything we've talked about today, treat your LinkedIn as kind of your full tech stack, I guess,
Mhm.
for your personal brand and to generate sales. And
Yep.
basically, your profile is your landing page. Make sure you're choosing one niche. Don't be afraid to just niche down and speak to one audience, be known for one thing. Make sure that your LinkedIn profile reflects that. And then show up in the feed, whether that's posting comments on other people's posts or starting to post your own content. And don't be worried about what other people are going to say about that. And then, yeah, really give some insightful human content to attract your right audience. That leads people to your profile and ideally leads to DMs and closed business. Is that how you would think? That's a good way to summarize it.
You nailed it.
Cool. All right, Finn, this has been awesome. I appreciate your time today, man.
Same to you.